It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of 3-goal leads. It was the age of giving up 4 unanswered. It was the epoch of David Perron getting angry in the clutch again. It was the epoch of giving a guy with the same name as a Friends character his first ever overtime winner. Yes, welcome again to the Blues Rants podcast. I'm your host, Philip Miller. No, you are not suddenly tuning in to an audiobook version of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Blues Cities, but that's certainly what we got Sunday against Vegas. Blues obviously had a 3-0 lead to open up the period, with the first looked absolutely dominant for the first half of the game. Quite literally, almost 30 minutes in, give up 2 goals from former Blues in the second period, give up the game tire in the third, give up the lead in the third, tie the game courtesy of none other than David Perron himself, only to fall in overtime to Chandler Stevenson, who was, congrats to him, finding a very, very nice breakout sort of reclamation career with the Vegas Golden Knights right now. But that still being said, we got a lot to talk about in this episode. We will talk more on the overtime loss to Vegas, as well as the disappointing road trip 0-2-1. We'll tee up tonight's game against San Jose. Puck drops at St. Louis in Enterprise Center in an hour. We will talk about Nashville, Peter Laviolette out as head coach, what that means for the Nashville Predators going forward, and we'll break that down a little more. We'll talk a little bit more about the World Juniors as they came to a close this weekend. We will also try and give our next hint for the jersey giveaway. I'm sure you guys are still excited for that, and we might even get into a little update about the San Antonio Rampage if we can get into it. But we start again. Overtime loss against Vegas. Now, as I just quickly recapped for you, Blues started out 3-0 lead in the first period. They were dominating. I mean, dominating. I said in the last episode, yes, this is a wake-up episode. This was a wake-up call that the Blues needed after that complete travesty of a game in Colorado. And they did that. They absolutely did that. Puck possession, the passing, the cohesion, playing 5 guys against 1. It was tremendous. And that game really, it should have been 5-6-0 were it not for the theatrical Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury just not showing any signs of aging. He is absolutely still a dominant goaltender in this league. Arguably one of the best of the decade. I've seen votes for it. But you let them get back into the game after David Perron and Max Pacioretty get into a scrum. Ryan Reeves lays down a couple of hits on Alex Pietrangelo that were a little cheap. David Perron was certainly not a fan of that. Berube just calling that hockey, which that doesn't surprise me. It's Craig Berube. We know what kind of player he was. For those of you that didn't know, by the way, fun fact about Craig Berube, 7th all-time in penalty minutes. Let me say that one more time. 7th all-time in penalty minutes. Not exactly a stat you brag about to your kids all the time, but still, that hasn't been touched. That has not been touched. He is 7th all-time in penalty minutes. That is for real. Go look it up. Anyways, getting back to the loss against Vegas. Again, they had the momentum for the entire first 27 minutes of the game. Then former Blue Ryan Reeves gets a goal. Former Blue Paul Stastny gets a goal. And just like that, it's a 3-2 game. Again, this is not only a good team. Obviously, they're atop in the Pacific Division, I believe, as of right now. Yes, I have that correct. They are atop the Pacific Division with 54 points, as many as the Colorado Avalanche do in second. It is a very good team over there in Vegas, looking for more playoff hopes down the road. Good team, but more importantly, the momentum shift there. It was a literal on-off switch. As David Perron even said in his post-game interview with Erica Weston, this is a team that does not need a lot to get their crowd going. It is as much as you would expect from a Las Vegas-based sports franchise. They're nutty. They can get rowdy in an instant. It's theatrical. It's exciting. It's everything you'd want. But still, the Blues had a chance to put away them multiple times in this game, and they failed to do that. And coming out in the third period, they were completely lethargic. They just lost all sense of momentum, and they ended up giving up the lead. Now, of course, they scored on the power play, which, again, I give them full credit. They improved that because the Blues went 1 for 3 on the power play against Colorado. They scored 2 in this game, and it should have been a done deal, but we go into overtime. Bad turnover there at the blue line. It's overtime. I mean, sometimes overtime games are just determined by who makes line changes better. In all honesty, that's sometimes all it comes down to when it's 3-on-3. Definitely more exciting to watch, but all the same, probably the thing I liked the least about this game, other than the fact that they just turned into a completely different team in the middle of the second period and for the entirety of the third period, were some of the comments afterwards, including one by Craig Berube, which I was not really expecting, was the, oh, well, we got a point out of it mentality. We got a point. We managed to get the 1. You had a 3-0 lead in the first. The last time we got a lead like that was 4-0 against the Kings, and it was over then and there. You knew that. Now, granted, LA not doing good. None of the California teams doing well right now, and we'll get to that in a second with San Jose's tee-up. But that's not the mentality you can have going into this next swing. And that's the one reason I do have optimism for this, because you look at the next few games for the St. Louis, it's very easy. The first half of January for the Blues is very easy. You have San Jose tonight, who is trying to tread water, excuse the pun. You've got Buffalo, you've got the Rangers, you've got the Ducks, you've got the Flyers. All 5 of those teams. The next 5 games, you are not facing a playoff team. Flyers are trying to fight for a wild card spot. They're close. The Sabres, I don't think they're in it. If I have to remember the standings correctly, no, they're out of it. They're underneath they're underneath the Panthers, excuse me. You cannot leave that game with the, oh, we got a point mentality, in my mind, when you had a 3-0 lead and you coughed it up like that. It's just plain unbearable to watch. And again, they were all greasy goals. Yeah, maybe Allen should have gotten 1 or 2 of them. I don't know. I really just saw nothing more than a lot of effort shown by the Blues early and a lot of effort shown by the Knights late. And as we've seen in the past, no lead is safe anymore in today's league, not even a 3-0 one that you scored in the first period. That is all I'm going to rant about for the loss against Vegas. Again, I will say we have a very easy schedule coming up for this opening part of January. Let's get 2020 going on a good note, because I saw somebody comment that was actually pretty funny. They're the worst team of the year being 2020, which they are. If you include the New Year's Eve game against Arizona, they are now 0-2-1 to go through 2020. And again, they were 0-2-1 on this road trip. A difficult one. You had Arizona, you had Vegas, and you had Colorado, all number 1 or number 2 in their respective divisions. Which is why I think tonight you need to get the win. You cannot think of anything but we have to get this win here, and you can't think it's a guaranteed win. So we'll start teeing up the game that's coming on in San Jose tonight. Sharks still looming around. They are sub 500, 19, 21, and 4, and they have really fallen from grace. The team's only getting older. You re-signed Patrick Marleau, which, great. He is a franchise player for the Sharks forever, but again, I say the word forever because he's practically a walking dinosaur now. Obviously, you got to shut down guys like Evander Kane, who scored a hat trick in lost in that wacky game against Washington. Kind of the same story as the Blues. They lost 5-4 in overtime, gave up 2 goals in the final minute. It was I saw a stat somewhere. It was one of, I think, about 9 or 10 games where a player scored an empty net goal. I believe Logan Couture scored the empty net goal, and they still lost the game. Can you believe that? Can you believe scoring an empty net? It's 4-2. There's like 1 minute to go. You're like, oh, yeah, we got this. And then all of a sudden, nope, we're going to overtime. And then Lars Eller scores and then wins the game for Washington. That's another sign that you guys need to win the game, because you give up 2 goals in the final minute of a 4-2 game that you have locked down. That means you have to have that in the bag. Well, apparently not necessarily for this year's San Jose Sharks. And that's another point I want to get onto. It's the goaltending. Just pepper the heck out of the goaltenders. Sorry for my own censorship, but you have to try and obliterate these 2 goaltenders. Martin Jones with an 890. The goaltenders put together have a save percentage of 895, excuse me. They have a goals against average of 3.12. That is got to be one of the worst goaltending tandem numbers in the league. You have a starting goaltender that's not even 900. Your goals for is 23rd in the league. Your goals against is 30th. And this is still a team with a lot of weapons. Like I said, Evander Kane scored a hat trick. I think he's got 4 goals in his last 2. You've got Logan Couture, the captain, who is obviously a beast. Tomas Hertl, who's been phenomenal. Yet you have an aging roster. You have a sort of struggling Brent Burns, even though he's got 22 assists on the season. And you have a team that's already fired their head coach, by the way. And Bob Bogner, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, is 4-5-2 through his first 11 games. So this has to be the game where you're saying, okay, we had that little slump. Everybody has them. We've had them. Colorado had them. Boston's had them. Boston went, I want to say, almost 10 games without a win. Or maybe just like a couple of regulation wins in like 6 straight or something like that. So every team's going through these slumps. And I don't, this is at no point I'm saying burn the wagons, the Blues need to freak out. But this is the one where you need to get a win and get back on track. The one where I panicked a little bit was that 4-game skid at the beginning of the year, and the 3 straight losses, 1 to Toronto and 1 to Pittsburgh and 1 to Buffalo, where you drop 3 straight. This one, again, you have very qualified teams. You'll likely see them in the playoffs. We could play them in the playoffs. I think if the playoffs started today, the Blues would be seeing the Yotes first overall in the division. No, I have that wrong. You'd be seeing one of the wild cards. Anyways, point being, Sharks are not the behemoth that they were last year, especially without their captain, without their head coach. Tonight's the one you got to get a win, and you got to start building from there, because then you have Buffalo, you have New York, you have Anaheim, and you have Philadelphia. Before then, you face the Avs, the Canucks, the Flames, the Oilers, the Jets, Canadian road swing there, the Hurricanes, the Jets again, and that basically takes you into early February. All those still solid teams that are either in playoff position or hunting for the playoff position. So the Blues need to get their butts in gear tonight. If you don't, I'm really starting to think that something's got to happen and there's going to be a little bit of a struggle. We'll move on. We'll recap a little bit of the World Juniors. Canada wins gold in a wild finish. It was a storyline-filled World Juniors, man. How much fun was that? I never really wanted to get into the World Juniors much, but after the thing with the whole with the captain of Canada not taking his helmet off during the Russian anthem. You had Alexis Lafreniere getting injured for a couple of games, and then you have him coming back and just again lighting it up. You had the Canadians pretty much blowing out everybody after the Russia game, and you had all the theatrics of the final couple minutes there of play in the game. But I think most importantly, what I'm looking forward to the most, Joel Hofer. Joel Hofer winning gold for the Canadians. He was lights out for a guy that didn't even show up to the Canadians camp this year before the World Juniors. And I mean, he was marvelous. I don't know if you got to watch highlights of this guy. Look him up on YouTube on iihf.com. You've got to check this guy out. Very pleased, very much looking forward to a Blues prospect from Team Canada, as well as a prospect from Team Russia, Nikita Alexandrov, who actually scored the leading goal in that gold medal match for Team Russia, breaking the tie in the second period. But a lot of fun for the World Juniors. Congrats to Team Canada for winning. Hopefully Team US can do a little better next year. But very much looking forward to Alexis Lafreniere, who has been hyped as probably the number one overall pick in the upcoming 2020 NHL draft. You've got Joel Hofer for the Blues, who could definitely see some time with San Antonio or even with St. Louis in the coming seasons. Nikita Alexandrov, he's got a lot of speed to him. He's got a lot of style. I like the way that he skates. He's a fast skater. So we'll have to see what happens going on from there. So that's the end of the World Junior update, and that's the end of the World Juniors as Canada takes gold. Here's your little reminder, by the way, to vote for David Perron. What are you doing? Vote for David Perron. You got 4 days left of voting for the last man. Invalid. NHL.com/vote. Get this man into the All-Star game. He deserves it. Y'all know he deserves it. Get David Perron into the All-Star game. Alrighty. Continuing on. So, breaking news last night as Peter Laviolette was relieved of coaching duties along with assistant coach Kevin McCarthy from the Nashville Predators. Nashville Predators are not in the playoff picture after 41 games. Later on today, more breaking news broke. John Hines, who was fired from the Devils back in December, has been hired as the new coach for the Nashville Predators. Interesting move by the Nashville Predators to fire him. I wasn't aware of this at first. Peter Laviolette, the second coach in Nashville Predators history since 1998. You had Barry Trotz and you had Peter Laviolette, who was in, I believe, his 6th season as the Predators head coach. Just the second coach. He was relieved of duties just the same as Barry Trotz was. I believe Trotz was fired after the end of his last season. A bit of a shock move, I'm sure, especially for Nashville fans. I believe David Poile was on a radio show just earlier this week saying, firing a coach is not in the game plan. He's really not thinking of a coaching change. I mean, but you give up, the Winter Classic in front of 80,000 fans. You lose your guy, Ryan Ellis. They've been struggling with their injuries, but right now, again, Predators out of the playoffs as of right now, as they stand 6th in the Central Division behind the Minnesota Wild, 19, 15, and 7. And you wonder how much of it falls on Laviolette. I really have to say I don't think so. I mean, we've been looking at Pekka Rinne, and Pekka Rinne has been he's not really been great for this past season. He's another one of those goaltenders of the decade bids. He's not been good this year. UC Saros has been better. I still don't know if UC Saros has starting goaltender potential. I don't believe he does. And this is a team that still has taken a lot of turnover. You've got guys like Kyle Turris that came in, Mikhail Granlund, but at the same time, you've lost guys like PK Subban, who, albeit has not been himself since suffering that ankle injury, a big part of the reason I think he's not producing anything in New Jersey. But they've basically been treading water ever since his big start in October for Pekka Rinne. He went 7-0-2. Next month he goes 2-4. He has an overall 896 save percentage. Another problem that's carried on with the Predators after last season is that penalty kill. PK is absolutely horrendous this year. I think they are one of the worst in the league. And then I saw a lot of people on Twitter kind of ripping the John Hynes hiring. Obviously, we've seen there are a lot of candidates out there. By the way, side thought, who of you, raise your hand if you're listening. By the way, thank you for listening to the podcast. Raise your hand if you genuinely thought that Mike Babcock, Bill Peters, Pete DeBoer, Jim Montgomery, John Hynes, and Peter Laviolette would be out of a job before Jeff Blashill in Detroit or Bruce Boudreau in Minnesota. You liars. That's insane. We've had already 6 coaches out of the league. Not to mention also Mark Crawford, currently under suspension, though he's an assistant coach with the Chicago Blackhawks. But a lot of people, again, ripping the John Hynes firing because, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of candidates there. There's Babcock, there's Peters, who, those two kind of have reputations going with them. You have Pete DeBoer. It's a good chance that he just lost the locker room. Obviously, Jim Montgomery is taking time to himself to, look after his own health and well-being. But, the John Hynes firing was one of few where the coach was just not performing the way it should. It wasn't this whole sudden spectacle we've had in the NHL with all sorts of abuse allegations or misconduct, unbecoming of a professional NHL franchise. So a lot of people are still ripping, Nashville for hiring the New Jersey Devils coach. But I mean, I think it's more or less that John Hynes came in and started coaching a bad team, if we're being honest with you. I mean, you have to remember that he served his time in the AHL. He made the playoffs with the Devils this decade. You could just stop right there. Think about that. He actually got the Devils to the playoffs. He helped Taylor Hall win the Hart Trophy after fleecing Edmonton in the Adam Larson-Taylor Hall trade. He'll finally have a goalie now in Nashville. Maybe Pekka Rinne has some sort of resurgence. Maybe UC Saros can start coming into the limelight a little further. So I don't mind the John Hynes hiring. The Laviolette firing kind of interests me because I think it was similar to the Blues firing of Mike Yeo. Now, obviously if it's ifs and buts or candies and nuts and hindsight being 2020 and all of that. But at the time, I think it was really that Mike Yeo was not able to coach the roster that we had to its fullest potential. And at the beginning, we had a pretty fully healthy roster. Obviously with ROR, with Vladdy, David Perron coming back. Pietrangelo, of course, was still elite as he is now. So the Laviolette firing interests me on that. Where do the Nashville Predators go from here, and are they a playoff contender? Well, Money Puck still has them somewhere around sub 75%. The team has been solid 5-on-5. It's just special teams, man. They have got to figure out special teams. Hopefully, Pekka Rinne has some sort of resurgency. I say hopefully kind of quote unquote because I am a Blues fan, as we all are listening probably right now, and we don't want Nashville in the playoffs. But I still think they have a strong chance. Maybe the locker room shakeup is the kick in the pants that the players need to step up their game and get going, especially on special teams. And of course, you have the headmaster of it all, the one and only general manager in Nashville Predators history, David Poile. David Poile, we all know he is the wild card of general managers. He's been known for making the most boisterous out of the blue trades. Most of them, seeming to have paid off. And of course, we had the signing of Matt Duchene over in Nashville. So this is a team that was, again, just in the Stanley Cup final 3 years ago. I had to catch myself there. 3 years ago now. They were in the Stanley Cup final. I don't think we've heard the last of Nashville. Kind of hard to say this almost, but the Central's kind of a stacked division. I mean, you have all teams, every single team in the Central Division has a winning record. So this still, even with wild card spots, it's still up for grabs. Nashville's right there, only a few points behind, 3-4 points behind for a wild card spot. So I think really anything could happen in the Central Division, and definitely anything could happen after firing a head coach. We should all know so well. Anyways, we will move on. Next segment of our show here. I think we got a hint to give out to you guys. Every episode, I've been giving hints revealing the identity of a current or former St. Louis Blues player. And I should have this every single time, and I don't. On Saturday at 6 p.m. before our show, you will have a chance to text in and try to win one of 2 Jordan Binnington jerseys from this year. Your next clue: this former or current St. Louis Blue used to play on the same Montreal Canadiens roster with other former Blues, Yaroslav Halak and Scott Gomez. So that is your hint for this episode as we continue on. Looking at some of the lineups against San Jose tonight, Niko Mikkola making his NHL debut after Jake Wallman got reassigned back to San Antonio. Mikkola should be on a line with Robert Bortuzzo as Parayko is still out for tonight. Craig Berube saying it's a bit of an upper body injury, but he's not too concerned about it. Doesn't sound too serious. Some good news, though, for Blues fans. Sammy Blais and Carl Gunnarsson out on the ice. Sammy Blais, obviously, with a wrist surgery back in November. He was seen on practice actually gripping a stick. Again, his timetable for reevaluation was still sometime after the All-Star break. But good news there as Sammy Blais is back on the ice again and practicing with the squad. Carl Gunnarsson, Craig Berube said he could have started tonight, but he's only had one practice under his belt after a couple of weeks. So he's going to let Gunnarsson sit for the evening. On the other side, Niko Mikkola making his NHL debut tonight. And Jordan Kyrou is back in the lineup alongside possibly Jaden Schwartz and Braden Shen on the second line. Berube saying it's an important part of a season for us coming off the road trip. Played pretty good hockey all year, but we've got to keep building and getting better. This is an opportunity to get better at home here. We've got to get after it. Obviously, like I said, I like that mindset way more than the we got a point mentality. I think this heading home, this season-long 5-game homestand is a refresher that the Blues will need and use to get back into the win column and keep that lead over the Central Division. We'll talk now a little bit about the San Antonio Rampage. We had an article posted up on Blues Rants. By the way, we're still writing articles. Head to bluesrants.com to check out all of our recaps, insights, highlights, and more. Our very own Kyle Hanner, has his recap of the past couple of weeks of Rampage hockey. Rampage not starting off the new year quite as well, similarly to the St. Louis Blues. They snapped a 7-game losing streak headed into the Christmas break, but split home and home with the Texas Stars. They sit currently 6th in the Central Division, 10th in the Western Conference, and 23rd overall in the league. Kyle saying, good news for the Blues fans. It's their third overall in the power play in the West, 5th overall in the penalty kill. So special teams has been great. Problem, though, has been injuries and call-ups. Obviously, Blues fans have seen their fair share. We've had Jake Wallman, Nico McCullough, Clem Costin got some time. Austin Pagansky, former UND captain, got called up. The Aussie, Nathan Walker, got up a call as well. Derek Pouliot also saw some time, and Derek Pouliot will be going to the AHL All-Star Classic on January 26th and 27th. Congratulations to him. But still, for all intents and purposes, San Antonio Rampage still have some work to do. They've been kind of slogging through the Central Division with about really the only silver lining being the special team. So hopefully 2020 is their year, just like the Blues, to turn things around. And speaking of year, yeah, you know where I'm going with this. January 7th, 2020, the 1-year anniversary of calling up Jordan Binnington after his first game against the Philadelphia Flyers, where they got a 3-0 shutout. Obviously, after the game, Laura Branigan's Gloria was played in the locker room, and to all fans of hockey, the rest is history. So, 1 year, just 1 year with Jordan Binnington. Can you guys believe that? That's pretty nuts to me. Obviously, he is 19-7-4 to start this season. In total now, he has 43 wins, 12 losses, 5 overtime losses. Total save percentage of an average .921, goals against of 2.22. Obviously, Binner is going to be an elite goaltender with the Blues for some time. And of course, Armstrong made the smart play, I believed, to sign him to just that 2-year deal in case, even after all that time, it were to seem like some sort of fluke. But I get the feeling we will be hearing from Jordan Binnington for quite some time. Never know. But it's been arguably a career year, probably the best year of Jordan Binnington's life. Stanley Cup champion, of course. And who knows? The Blues are still atop the Central. They're making the bid now. Armstrong hasn't made any crazy trades aside from the Edmondson trade at the beginning of the season and the Robbie Fabry trade later on. So this team's still all in. They're still buying into the system of Craig Berube. The next man up mentality has still been working after all this time. We'll see what goes on from there for the second half of the season. Hopefully they get to turn things around after the 0-2-1 road trip, though. Little other side note in the NHL, New York Rangers, Igor Shesterkin, starting his first NHL debut tonight for the Rangers at MSG. An interesting one for sure, considering all the hype up around goaltenders Alexander Georgiev and the King, Henrik Lundqvist. There's been tons and tons and tons of trade rumors. I've seen dozens of armchair GMs on Cap Friendly looking for mock trades and things like that. Could we see a move tonight or within the next couple of days? I think it's a really good possibility. New York Rangers taking on the Colorado Avalanche tonight on NBC Sports Network. That might just have to do it for this one. Probably just wrap up this show a little bit early. Also, by the way, Ilya Kovalchuk in Montreal. I like the Ilya Kovalchuk move, despite what a lot of people are saying. Yes, I know he's had some drama in the latter half of his career. I know he's got to be approaching 40 now as I look up his age. 36. 36 years of age. He's had some dramatics with his former club in LA and, some of his time. Sorry, blanking out there. I think it's a totally safe move. I think he signed a league minimum contract at $750K. It's a safe move, obviously, for Montreal, and he was pretty active in his debut for the Canadiens. I watched that game just to see how he did. He got an assist on 19 minutes, 25 seconds of ice time, 25 shifts. It wasn't enough to get them the win in that game, but I think he'll still be a veteran presence. I think he's now found his love for the game again after the first stint of coming back. He's been in the KHL for pretty much parts of 5 years, and returned to the NHL last season. So, after everything that's been said, I doubt anything monumental will come out of Ilya Kovalchuk. I think it's a totally fair and rational move by the Montreal Canadiens. And the trade deadline is only getting closer. The Montreal Canadiens, I want to say they're still in that possible playoff position. The entire Atlantic Division, even part of the Metro, and even just the wild card race in general is still up for grabs. It's getting really tight, almost on both sides. But Habs obviously had a solid start there. They've trended downward a lot. You look at, there's only 3 teams with a positive record in their last 10 in the Atlantic Division. Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida Panthers. I believe the Maple Leafs just went 9-0-1 in their last 10, something ridiculous. Obviously, new leadership under Sheldon Keefe is working. They're playing their players correctly now. And just like that, man, the Maple Leafs and the Lightning, who are on a 7-game tear, 7-game winning streak, just like that, all of a sudden, they're not completely out of the picture yet. And just like I said before, every good team goes through their skids. Boston 4-1-5. They have lost 3 in a row. Anything can happen, man. It's the NHL. Literally, the Blues came back from January 3rd on to win the Cup. Not saying that's gonna happen again. That's kind of a ludicrous one-time thing. But it should be a real fun second half. Trade deadline is coming upon us, so we'll probably see some deadline moves from some of the mellowing teams. Maybe Florida, maybe Buffalo, maybe Carolina or Pittsburgh does something big. Maybe the Canucks make a big move. Who knows? You're hearing all kinds of rumors, and I'll probably have to get to some of those rumors in the next coming episodes. But for now, that's going to be all from the Blues Rants podcast. My name has been Philip Miller. Again, we still have more outro songs that we want to run. Again, if you guys have any connections to St. Louis-based bands, Southern Illinois, Missouri-based bands that would like to get featured in our outro, by all means, we would love to have you guys on. That's going to be it for this one. I leave you now with the Kendrick Smith Trio, a good friend of mine playing in that jazz trio. You can find them at the Dark Rune and at Thurman's and Shaw down in St. Louis. Here is their fast rendition of Shining Moments. That's going to be it for me. Thank you guys for tuning in.